All right, hello and welcome to the Grimm Times podcast. Today, for this episode, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to be interviewed myself by Christy. She's here in studio with me. If you want to say hi.
Hi.
First off, I want to touch on a few different little things here. Hopefully, you all enjoyed the last set of podcasts. I plan to have a few more with Carl coming up here. I want to mention the passing of Tim Wilson. That was another big deal that I wanted to talk about for a second. He was one of my favorite comedians of all time. He was only 52 when he passed away, which is really sad. We definitely lost one of the best comedians out there. He was very underappreciated as well. If you have a chance, look him up on YouTube or try and get one of his albums. And his name is Tim Wilson once again. So do yourself a favor and check that out. He was a regular on the Bob and Tom show. You might have heard him there. So yeah, just check that out. But anyway, for today, we're going to do kind of a lighter show, I guess. We're going to talk about one of my favorite things that I've personally done, and probably, our flagship thing for Jeff Jarman Productions, which is rebranded from Lazy Monkey Studios and all that stuff, because Lazy Monkey was taken, like BrokenCookie.com was taken, and all that different stuff. So let's get started here. We'll talk about the Jeff Jarman Show. Christy, if you want to say anything in particular, or just jump right into the questions here, either way.
Nothing really specific. One of my biggest questions is kind of how it was working with your different people, mostly your regulars, Johnny versus Randy and Skylar and Zach. I know Skylar can be a little rowdy at times. I'm sure Johnny has his moments. So how do they compare with working with Randy or Zach?
Um, there's a lot there to talk about because each person. That's the good thing about the Jeff Jarman Show is we have so many characters here. I mean, in real life, they are characters, and I think they make me more of a character myself because I can kind of play off of them. I'm still working on that part of my deal, but for Randy, he is definitely a huge asset to the show because he not only has such a huge range of characters that he can do, he he comes up with a lot of the ideas too for different skits. I mean, if I had to pick the two who, the two people in the on the team who come up with the most skits, it would be probably me and him. So it's definitely always nice to have another creative input, and Skylar does a lot too, and Johnny as well. But yeah. So with Randy, it's nice because he can just really jump into the character without a whole lot of direction either. But then again, I appreciate Johnny for the way that he will follow direction and things like that, and Zach as well. He's really good at doing what I ask specifically, right down to the T. So it's really an interesting dynamic working with all these different people, and especially seeing a couple guys like Johnny and Randy interacting with each other. I mean, it's almost something that just writes itself. I don't even have to come up with anything; they can just play off of each other, and it's golden. I mean, people would really appreciate it if they took the time to watch these skits and see where these guys are coming from in terms of their creativity, their inner creativity coming out. Yeah, and then Skylar, he has been with me from the beginning, and he is one of my, he's one of the architects of the Jeff Jarman Show. He comes up with a lot of ideas as well, actually. I don't know if he gets enough credit for that really, because he's come up with a lot of skits that I might not necessarily have come up with on my own, just because they're so out in left field compared to what I normally do. So it almost appeals to another audience right there. So I mean, everybody's kind of putting their own flair into the show, you could say.
So is it worth it to deal with his stubbornness and, as I've heard, unwillingness to follow the rules sometimes for the input that he gives?
Well, eh, well, with Skylar, you gotta figure he's got a lot going on upstairs in that brain, and so he does quite a bit. And sometimes, he might not even have registered what I asked him to do, but what he ends up doing on his own is just as good, if not better. So, I mean, and if I really want something to be the right way, then we can always do it again. And he's always been really good and really willing to do a scene more than, a couple times. I think there's been a couple scenes where I've had, 10 takes just trying to get the right one. I can remember one when we did Keepers of the Key. I think it was episode 3 or 4, but we were walking through the woods and I was behind the camera and I had Skylar walking down this little pathway and he had a line to say, and I told him that when he says the line, he needs to turn and look toward the camera, not at the camera, but toward that direction, so that the voice would carry and it would register on the camera a lot better. And I swear, it took 3 times in a row he said his line looking away from the camera. And I was just about to lose it. I mean, I was just like, you've got to look this way. And I think we ended up taking it, with him looking away from the camera because it was just one of those deals where he was doing his own thing, and I was like, "Well, we gotta pick it up." And you could hear his line, but it was really faint. So I mean, it's kind of funny sometimes working in those scenarios, and it makes for good bloopers too sometimes.
Is that the same for his willingness to, for lack of a better term, I'm going to go into wrestling here, take bumps? Because I've seen how many times he's fallen, been hit with things, ran into various things, and I don't see really any of the other characters on the show doing those things.
Oh man, I mean, if that I appreciate very much. If there's somebody I need to jump off a cliff into thorn bushes, Skylar is my man. I mean, he is willing to do pretty much anything. And usually he is the one who suggests it in the first place. I don't even have to ask him to do this. Like when we filmed Keepers of the Key 5, the reshoot, we did 2 versions on that one. But you can laugh, it's okay. Yeah, for Keepers of the Key 5, he actually came up with this completely on his own. It was where his bag went flying off into the woods or something because he wears this plastic bag on his head to protect him from who knows what. And he goes chasing after this bag, and he literally like jumps up in the air and barrel rolls into thorn bushes. And I don't think we found that out that they were thorn bushes until after he had already jumped into them. But either way, it was really funny, and it made for a great scene on camera.
Oh, all right. So how about Zach? I know he's changed a lot. He's grown up. He's gotten bigger. Because I know at the beginning of the Jeff Jarman show, he was pretty giggly, and I'm sure you had to do a lot of takes with that one. But how is it working with him growing up, and how he's maturing and changing through the years?
This is gonna sound kind of weird, and I know Zach, if you're listening, if you look at early on in the show, you can tell how much younger he looks. I mean, go look at the first episode compared to now. I think it's 5 years later, 5 or 6 years later that we've been doing this show. Yeah, it's almost like two completely different people because you've got, the one style where he used to be like, super giggly and he was always kicking people in the nuts, and that was like our thing. But then now he's pretty much totally different. I haven't got to work with him a lot lately, so I think that given the opportunity, we'll be able to kind of shape him into the actor that I need him to be, if that makes sense. And I'm trying to bring Cisco, my nephew, into it as well. So we've got a lot of. It's almost like if you look at the WWE, because I'm a pro wrestling guy, so I'm going to use a lot of analogies on the show. And if you look at the WWE, they're developing new young guys as well. They're not just using the same people. So the more we can build up our roster of actors and actresses, I think the better off the show will be for everyone because nobody wants their character to get stale, and that's the thing I'm trying to produce is good quality content where nothing is stale and everybody is kind of given their fair shake in terms of screen time.
So I know since we've moved, it kind of uprooted you away from all everybody that you film with, and I'm the only one out here. And with working, we don't really have time to film much, plus you don't have many character options out here. Since we've been out here for almost 2 years now, do you think you've come up with a lot of new ideas for when you go back?
Well, yeah, the time away has definitely given me a chance to think about things quite a bit. Um, I haven't come up with a whole lot of new ideas, to be honest, but I have come up with a few, and I'm pretty picky on what I keep and what I don't, and only the really good ideas that I can visualize somebody in the cast doing, I hold on to. So I get a few ideas. I've launched the Grimm Times podcast, since you can do that long distance, and it's not that much of a struggle to get a hold of Johnny, who I've had on the Grimm Times podcast, or Skylar, or whoever, and you can do it from long distance. It's the forum that's more accessible at the moment. Given the time away, though, I'm probably more motivated than ever, and I think that when I get back, we'll start hitting it pretty hardcore and get quite a few good episodes pumped out before even a few months have gone by that I've been there.
So looking back at your old episodes, and they were kind of, I mean, you use different cameras. Obviously, now you've got your fancy HD video camera. So do you have any plans for sort of revamping the old episodes, maybe enhancing them or anything like that?
I've come across this idea a few times because at one point I was going to go through and re-edit all of the original episodes, and put out kind of a new string of episodes with only the really good stuff that I thought was worth keeping in. But then again, I go back and I don't have the original source material anymore. It's kind of sad because I've lost quite a few parts of the episodes just through changing computers and changing hard drives and all this kind of stuff. And I guess I should have been more careful with that looking back. But then again, I still find videos like on MySpace that I didn't even know existed anymore. I totally forgot about them. So I'm trying to recover what I can. And I mean, maybe in the future, if they have a way to easily go through and remaster these old episodes, I would definitely love to do it. Even though they're not that funny, or the camera quality, or like, not the camera quality, but the production values aren't that high. I think that's one good way to say it. They're just an amateur type of episode, amateur type of format, where it's just not really playing to our strengths, and just kind of messing around on camera. So you got to keep it for that sentimental value, and that's the main reason I keep it labeled as Jeff Jarman Show episode 1 and 2 and 3, because and 4, I guess, could be thrown into that category. I think 5 or 6 is where it really started to take off as a really good show, a really good product that we were putting out. But with those first 4 or 5 episodes, I think they're part of the history of the show, and I don't want to get rid of them at this point.
Well, yeah, every show kind of starts out. It's not just going to start off awesome, especially when it's a small group production like yours. But you've definitely come pretty far in the years that you've done it. So
I think everybody has gotten better as an actor. I know I definitely have, not just with the Jeff Jarman Show, but with the Keepers of the Key, and things that force me to act a little bit more than just the host of the show. So it was always kind of interesting seeing how people reacted to being on camera, because I know when I first got in front of the camera, it was slightly intimidating, but then again, because I own the camera, it wasn't quite as bad. And then for other people to come in, Skylar, pretty much no fear or intimidation of being in front of the camera. He took to it like a fish to water, which is really kind of funny. But yeah, it was really good for him. Zach, definitely a little nervous. Randy just jumped right into it, and Johnny as well, actually. They both picked up on it really, really well, really fast. So that's always good to see. I mean, and that goes again back to them being such characters. So, um, yeah, I mean, and then when I bring different people into the show, it's always kind of funny seeing those jitters being in front of the camera, even though it's not a huge studio production. I mean, just being in front of a camera where you're being recorded, your every move, and everybody's watching you, and you got to not mess up, or not switch around your lines and things like that. I mean, on the Jeff Jarman Show, we don't have a whole lot of specific lines. I mean, I can only think of a handful of skits where I've actually written out the dialogue for those skits. So I mean, it's pretty much one of those freestyle type shows where it's almost improv but not quite. So I mean, it just depends on what we decide to do at the moment.
Now, working off of that, do you prefer having different people on the show as compared to, because I know you've had Amy and Clarissa on before. I've been in an episode or two, or do you prefer working with the people you've been working with the whole time? Skylar, Randy, Zach, Johnny.
Well, I think it goes back again to having the variety of characters that you can have, somebody new come in to where, Arrow Gance isn't going to get stale because he's on camera so much. People want to see new characters, and sometimes characters will be born on their own, just naturally. Like, sometimes when you get a person on camera, they just start acting a certain way, and then it kind of just sticks. I think if you go back and you look at characters like Hogslop, he wasn't originally going to be a recurring character, as far as I remember. It was just for that one skit in particular. And then we later on did another episode, and we're like, hey, what if we put Hogslop in this situation, and things like that. That's kind of how Hogslop as the personal trainer came about. So I mean, it's just one of those deals. I always love working with Randy and Johnny and Skylar and Zach and those principal characters. But then again, having new guys come in like Chandler, Randy's son, even Amy come in for that one episode, and then you especially it was really cool to see you get in front of the camera. You were particularly pretty nervous when you came in the first time.
Well, even just doing this where I'm not even in front of a camera, but people are listening to me, and I've never really liked my voice over the phone or anything, so I'm nervous about how I'm going to sound, how I'm going to look. But I think being that I'm stuck with you for the next few years or so,
Yeah, you're gonna have to get used to it. What is this? I think this is your third podcast you've been in.
I think so.
Yeah, but yeah. So that pretty much answers the question, I guess. It's just one of those deals where you got to rotate people. But for right now, we're at the end of this podcast. The 20 minutes are just about up. I'm thinking about extending this podcast to like a half-hour deal. I don't know. I don't know if people would be willing to listen to all that or not. So we'll see where it goes, and I'll try and get some feedback on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. And check out the JeffJarmanShow.com. Check us out on YouTube, The Jeff Jarman Show, Keepers of the Key, CCW, and the Grimm Times is on YouTube as well. So check us out over there. You can find me on Facebook. Christy's on Facebook. If you're listening to this, you're probably friends with us on Facebook anyway. So, yeah, check out the website. Tell us what you think, and we'll catch you next time for part 2 of the Grim Times podcast.
Hi.
First off, I want to touch on a few different little things here. Hopefully you all enjoyed the last set of podcasts. I plan to have a few more with Carl coming up here. I want to mention the passing of Tim Wilson. That was another big deal that I wanted to talk about for a second. He was one of my favorite comedians of all time. He was only 52 when he passed away, which is really sad. But anyway, for today, we're going to do kind of a lighter show, I guess. We're going to talk about one of my favorite things that I've personally done, and probably, our flagship thing for Jeff Jarman Productions, which is rebranded from Lazy Monkey Studios and all that stuff, because Lazy Monkey was taken, like BrokenCookie.com was taken, and all that different stuff. So let's get started here. We'll talk about the Jeff Jarman Show. Christy, if you want to say anything in particular, or just jump right into the questions here, either way.
Nothing really specific. One of my biggest questions is kind of how it was working with your different people, mostly your regulars, Johnny versus Randy and Skylar and Zach. I know
We definitely lost one of the best comedians out there. He was very underappreciated as well. If you have a chance, look him up on YouTube, or try and get one of his albums. And his name is Tim Wilson once again. So do yourself a favor and check that out. He was a regular on the Bob and Tom Show. You might have heard him there. So yeah, just check that out. All right, hello and welcome to the Grim Times podcast. Today, for this episode, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to be interviewed myself by Christy. She's here in studio with me. If you want to say hi.